Chapter 1: A Fractured World. In the years following the defeat of the Nexus, the galaxy had known a period of peace and prosperity unlike any it had ever seen before. The Galactic Alliance, under the wise leadership of Prime Minister Lena Soren, had brought the diverse peoples of the galaxy together in a spirit of unity and cooperation, forging a new era of progress and understanding. But even as the Alliance worked tirelessly to maintain the delicate balance of power, tensions were brewing beneath the surface. On the fringes of the galaxy, a new threat was emerging, one that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the hard-won peace. The Ziraxian Empire, a once powerful civilization that had been weakened by centuries of infighting and decline, had suddenly burst onto the galactic stage with a vengeance. Led by a charismatic and ruthless emperor named Zortex, the Ziraxians had begun to expand their territory at an alarming rate, conquering world after world with their advanced weapons and technology. At first, the Alliance had tried to negotiate with the Ziraxians, hoping to find a peaceful solution to the growing crisis. But Zortex had proven to be an implacable foe, one who saw the Alliance as nothing more than a hindrance to his grand ambitions of galactic domination. As the Ziraxian threat grew more pressing, the Alliance found itself facing a difficult choice. Many of its member worlds, still recovering from the devastation of the Nexus War, were reluctant to get involved in another galactic conflict. They argued that the Alliance should focus on its own security, on protecting its own borders and interests, rather than risking everything in a fight against an enemy that seemed unbeatable. But Lena Soren knew that such thinking was short-sighted and dangerous. She understood that the Ziraxians posed a threat not just to the Alliance, but to the very idea of a free and united galaxy. If they were allowed to continue their conquests unchecked, it would only be a matter of time before they turned their sights on the rest of the galaxy, and by then, it would be too late to stop them. And so, with a heavy heart, Lena began to mobilize the Alliance for war. She reached out to the leaders of every world, every species, every faction, urging them to put aside their differences and come together in the face of a common enemy. She invoked the memory of the Nexus War, reminding them of the sacrifices that had been made, the unity that had been forged in the fires of adversity. At first, her calls for action were met with skepticism and resistance. Many of the Alliance worlds were still wary of the idea of another galactic conflict, and there were those who questioned whether Lena was leading them down a path of destruction. But as the Ziraxian threat continued to grow, as more and more worlds fell under their sway, the tide began to turn. One by one, the leaders of the Alliance began to see the wisdom in Lena's words, began to understand that the only way to protect their way of life was to stand together against the darkness. And so, as the drums of war began to beat once more across the galaxy, the Alliance began to come together in a way it never had before. Human soldiers from 100 different worlds took up arms alongside their alien allies, united in their determination to defend their homes and their loved ones. Scientists and engineers from every corner of the galaxy worked tirelessly to develop new weapons and technologies, knowing that the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. And at the center of it all stood Lena Soren, the woman who had brought them all together, who had given them a reason to fight and a cause to believe in. She knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, that there would be sacrifices and losses along the way. But she also knew that as long as they stood together, as long as they held fast to the ideals of unity and cooperation that had brought them this far, there was no force in the galaxy that could stand against them. As the Alliance fleet prepared for its first major offensive against the Ziraxians, Lena looked out at the sea of faces before her, the brave men and women who had answered the call to arms. And in that moment, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever darkness they might face, the light of hope and unity would always shine through. Chapter 2: The Battle of Zirax Prime. The Alliance fleet emerged from hyperspace on the outskirts of the Zirax system, the heart of the Zyraxian Empire. Before them lay a vast armada of enemy ships, their hulls bristling with advanced weaponry and their shields glowing with an eerie, pulsating energy. At the center of the Zyraxian fleet stood the massive flagship of Emperor Zortex himself, a behemoth of a vessel that dwarfed even the largest of the Alliance ships. Its very presence seemed to radiate an aura of menace and power, as if daring the Alliance to even contemplate an attack. But the soldiers and crews of the Alliance were undaunted. They had come too far, sacrificed too much to turn back now. With a roar of engines and a blaze of weapons fire, they charged forward to meet the enemy head-on. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. The Zyraxian ships were formidable opponents, their advanced technology and firepower more than a match for the Alliance fleet. But the Alliance had a weapon that the Zyraxians could never hope to match: the unwavering courage and determination of its people. Across the battlefield, human soldiers fought side by side with their alien allies, their differences forgotten in the heat of combat. They moved as one, their movements perfectly synchronized as they worked to outmaneuver and outgun the enemy ships. In the heart of the conflict, small, agile fighters darted and weaved through the chaos, picking off Zyraxian vessels with pinpoint accuracy. On the bridge of the Alliance flagship, Lena Soren watched the battle unfold with a mixture of pride and trepidation. She knew that every life lost, every ship destroyed, was a blow to the cause of unity and peace. But she also knew that this was a fight they could not afford to lose, that the fate of the entire galaxy hung in the balance. As the battle raged on, the tide began to turn in favor of the Alliance. The Zyraxians, for all their technology and firepower, were no match for the sheer grit and determination of the Alliance forces. One by one, their ships began to fall, their hulls shattered and their crews scattered to the void. But even as victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged. From the depths of the Zyraxian flagship, a massive energy weapon began to charge, its power building to a crescendo that threatened to engulf the entire battlefield. In that moment, Lena knew what she had to do. With a heavy heart, she gave the order for a small, elite team of human and alien soldiers to board the flagship and disable the weapon from within. It was a suicide mission, one that would almost certainly mean the deaths of all involved. But it was the only way to ensure the safety of the fleet and the success of the mission. As the strike team fought their way through the corridors of the flagship, Lena watched on the view screen with bated breath. Every moment seemed to stretch into an eternity, every explosion and burst of weapons fire a reminder of the sacrifices being made in the name of peace. And then, just as all seemed lost, the energy weapon sputtered and died, its power core destroyed by the brave actions of the strike team. A cheer went up from the Alliance fleet as the Zyraxian flagship began to list and burn, its once mighty form reduced to a flaming wreck. In the aftermath of the battle, as the Alliance fleet regrouped and tended to its wounded, Lena took a moment to reflect on all that had been lost and all that had been gained. The cost of victory had been high, with countless lives lost and ships destroyed. But they had shown the galaxy that unity and cooperation were more powerful than any weapon, that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the light of hope could never be extinguished. As the Alliance pressed on towards the heart of the Zyraxian Empire, Lena knew that there would be more battles to come, more sacrifices to be made. But she also knew that as long as they stood together, as long as they held true to the ideals that had brought them this far, there was no force in the galaxy that could stand against them. And so, with renewed determination and a fire in their hearts, the soldiers of the Alliance prepared for the challenges ahead, ready to face whatever lay before them in the name of unity, freedom, and peace. Chapter 3. The Price of Unity. In the wake of the Battle of Zyrax Prime, the Alliance found itself facing a new and unexpected challenge. The victory over the Zyraxian fleet had been a turning point in the war, a decisive blow against the empire that had threatened the peace and stability of the galaxy. But it had also come at a terrible cost, one that threatened to tear the fragile fabric of unity apart at the seams. Across the worlds of the Alliance, the toll of the war was beginning to mount. The constant battles and skirmishes, the endless stream of casualties and losses were taking their toll on the people and the resources of the member worlds. Many began to question whether the price of unity was too high, whether the dream of a galaxy at peace was worth the sacrifices being made. On the front lines, the soldiers of the Alliance were feeling the strain as well. The long months of fighting, the constant danger and fear, were wearing down even the most dedicated and experienced veterans. Some began to lose faith in the cause, to wonder whether their sacrifices were truly making a difference. Amidst this growing unrest, Lena Soren found herself facing a crisis of leadership. As the Prime Minister of the Alliance, she had been the driving force behind the war effort, the one who had rallied the member worlds to stand together against the Zyraxian threat. But now, as the costs of that unity began to mount, she found herself struggling to hold the Alliance together. Some of the member worlds, led by a charismatic and influential senator named Zoran Tak, began to call for a negotiated peace with the Zyraxians. They argued that the war had gone on long enough, that the time had come to cut their losses and secure the best possible terms for the Alliance. They pointed to the growing unrest and discontent among the people, warning that if the war continued, it could lead to the collapse of the Alliance itself. But Lena knew that a negotiated peace was not an option. She had seen firsthand the cruelty and ambition of Emperor Zortex, knew that he would never be satisfied with anything less than total domination of the galaxy. To make peace with the Zyraxians now would only be to invite future aggression and conquest. And so, with a heavy heart, Lena set out to rally the Alliance once more. She traveled from world to world, meeting with leaders and citizens alike, listening to their concerns and their fears. She reminded them of the ideals that had brought them together in the first place, the dream of a galaxy at peace, and the power of unity to achieve that dream. At the same time, she worked tirelessly to address the practical concerns of the member worlds. She secured new resources and support for the war effort, worked to improve the living conditions and morale of the soldiers on the front lines. She reached out to new allies and partners, seeking to build a broader coalition of support for the cause. Slowly but surely, Lena's efforts began to bear fruit. The member worlds, seeing the determination and leadership of their prime minister, began to come together once more. The soldiers on the front lines, knowing that they had the support and gratitude of the people they were fighting for, found new strength and resolve. And then, just as the Alliance was beginning to regain its footing, a new development changed the course of the war forever. On a remote, uninhabited world on the fringes of Zyraxian space, Alliance scouts discovered a hidden Zyraxian research facility, one that had been working on a new and terrifying weapon of mass destruction. The implications were clear. If the Zyraxians were allowed to complete their research and deploy this new weapon, it could mean the end of the Alliance and the dream of a galaxy at peace. The time had come for a bold and decisive strike, one that would cut the heart out of the Zyraxian war machine and bring an end to the conflict once and for all. As Lena and her generals planned the attack, they knew that the risks were high. The research facility was heavily defended, guarded by some of the most advanced and deadly Zyraxian technology. The Alliance would be putting its best and bravest soldiers on the line, risking everything in a desperate gamble to end the war. But they also knew that there was no other choice. The stakes were too high, the consequences of failure too dire. And so, with a sense of grim determination, the soldiers of the Alliance prepared for their most daring mission. Yet, knowing that the fate of the galaxy itself hung in the balance. As the strike force set out towards the research facility, Lena watched them go with a mix of pride and fear. She knew that the sacrifices they were making, the risks they were taking, were the price of unity, the cost of building a better future for all. And she could only hope that in the end, that price would prove to be worth it. Chapter 4. The Heart of Darkness. The strike force moved silently through the shadows of the Zeraxian research facility, their weapons at the ready and their senses on high alert. They had breached the outer defenses of the compound with surprising ease, thanks to the advanced stealth technology provided by the Alliance scientists. But they knew that the real challenge still lay ahead, in the form of the heavily guarded inner sanctum where the Zeraxians were developing their new weapon. Leading the strike force was Captain Jax Varys, a decorated veteran of the Alliance military known for his bravery and tactical brilliance. He had hand-picked his team for this mission, assembling a group of the finest soldiers and operatives from across the member worlds. Each one was a specialist in their field, from infiltration and sabotage to advanced weaponry and hand-to-hand combat. As they made their way deeper into the facility, the strike force encountered pockets of resistance from Zeraxian guards and security drones. But they moved with practiced efficiency, neutralizing each threat with swift and deadly precision. They had trained extensively for this mission, and they were determined to see it through no matter the cost. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of tense, nerve-wracking progress, they reached the heart of the facility. Before them stood a massive reinforced door, guarded by a phalanx of heavily armed Zeraxian soldiers. Captain Varys knew that this was the moment of truth, the point of no return. He signaled to his team to take up their positions, and then he gave the order to breach. What followed was a fierce and desperate battle, as the strike force clashed with the Zeraxian defenders in a deadly dance of laser fire and explosions. The Zeraxians fought with the fury of cornered animals, knowing that their very survival was at stake. But the Alliance soldiers were fueled by a righteous anger, a determination to put an end to the Zeraxian threat once and for all. In the end, it was Captain Varys who made the difference. With a daring and audacious move, he managed to break through the Zeraxian lines and make his way to the control room of the facility. There, he found himself face to face with the lead Zeraxian scientist, a brilliant but twisted mind who had devoted his life to the creation of ever more deadly weapons. The two men stared at each other across the room, each knowing that the fate of the galaxy would be decided in the next few moments. The scientist pleaded with Captain Varys to see reason, to understand the necessity of his work. He spoke of the glory and power that the Zeraxians would achieve with their new weapon, the empire they would build on the ashes of the Alliance. But Captain Varys was unmoved. He had seen too much death and destruction, too much suffering and loss to be swayed by the empty promises of a madman. With a single, decisive motion, he raised his weapon and fired, ending the scientist's life and his twisted dreams in one moment of searing heat and light. With the scientist dead and the control room secure, Captain Varys and his team set to work on their final objective. They planted a series of powerful explosive charges throughout the facility, designed to destroy the weapon and all of the research that had gone into its creation. Then, with a sense of grim satisfaction, they made their way back out of the compound, fighting through the remaining Zeraxian forces with a renewed sense of purpose. As they emerged from the facility and made their way back to their waiting ships, Captain Varys and his team could hardly believe what they had accomplished. They had struck a blow against the Zeraxian Empire that would be felt across the galaxy, a blow that would change the course of the war and the fate of countless worlds. But even as they celebrated their victory, they knew that the fight was far from over. The Zeraxians would not take this defeat lying down, and they would surely redouble their efforts to crush the Alliance and its dreams of unity and peace. And so, as the strike force returned to the waiting arms of their comrades and loved ones, they knew that they had to be ready for whatever came next. They had proven that the Alliance could stand against even the darkest of threats, But they also knew that the price of that defiance would be high. As Lena Soren and the leaders of the Alliance celebrated the success of the mission and mourned the loss of the brave soldiers who had given their lives to make it possible, they knew that they had taken a crucial step towards victory. But they also knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, and that the unity and determination of the Alliance would be tested as never before. And so, with heavy hearts but unbroken spirits, they prepared for the battles to come, knowing that the fate of the galaxy itself hung in the balance, and that the only way to secure a lasting peace was to fight for it with everything they had. The heart of darkness had been pierced, but the war was far from over, and the Alliance would need every ounce of courage and resolve to see it through to the end. Chapter 5. The Turning of the Tide. In the aftermath of the daring strike on the Zyraxian research facility, the war took on a new and unpredictable shape. The destruction of the Zyraxian secret weapon had dealt a massive blow to their morale and their military capabilities, and for the first time in months, the balance of power seemed to be shifting in favor of the Alliance. Across the galaxy, the news of the victory spread like wildfire, igniting a new sense of hope and determination in the hearts of the Alliance soldiers and citizens. On the front lines, the troops fought with renewed vigor and courage, pushing back the Zyraxian forces and reclaiming worlds that had been lost to the enemy. At the same time, the leaders of the Alliance worked tirelessly to capitalize on their newfound momentum. Lena Soren and her advisors reached out to new allies and partners, forging diplomatic ties and military alliances that would bolster the Alliance's strength and resources. They launched a massive propaganda campaign, using every means at their disposal to spread the message of unity and resistance across the galaxy. But even as the Alliance celebrated its victories and pressed its advantage, the Zyraxians were far from defeated. Emperor Zortex, enraged by the loss of his secret weapon and the growing resistance to his rule, unleashed a new wave of terror and destruction upon the galaxy. His forces struck at civilian targets and infrastructure, seeking to break the will of the Alliance through sheer brutality and fear. In the face of this onslaught, the Alliance found itself tested as never before. The unity and resolve that had carried them through the darkest days of the war were strained to the breaking point, as worlds and factions began to splinter and turn against each other in the face of the Zyraxian threat. It was in this moment of crisis that Lena Soren made a fateful decision. Seeing the growing divisions within the Alliance, she knew that the only way to keep the coalition together was to strike a decisive blow against the heart of the Zyraxian Empire itself. And so, with the support of her generals and advisors, she launched a massive offensive aimed at the Zyraxian homeworld of Zyrax Prime. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The full might of the Alliance fleet, bolstered by the ships and soldiers of a dozen new allies, clashed with the Zyraxian armada in a titanic struggle for supremacy. The skies above Zyrax Prime were lit up with the flashes of 1,000 exploding ships, as the two sides traded blows with a ferocity and intensity that defied belief. On the ground, Alliance troops battled their way through the streets and corridors of the Zyraxian capital, facing down fanatical resistance from the Emperor's elite guards and loyalist forces. They fought with a courage and determination that bordered on the superhuman, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the entire galaxy rested on their shoulders. In the end, it was the bravery and sacrifice of the Alliance soldiers that made the difference. With a final, desperate push, they managed to break through the Zyraxian defenses and storm the Imperial Palace itself. There, in a moment of supreme irony, they found Emperor Zortex himself, the once mighty ruler reduced to a cowering wreck in the face of his imminent defeat. With the Emperor in custody and the Zyraxian homeworld secured, the tide of the war had well and truly turned. The remaining Zyraxian forces, demoralized and leaderless, began to surrender en masse, and the Alliance found itself in control of vast swathes of the galaxy that had once been firmly in the grip of the Empire. But even as they celebrated their victory, The leaders of the alliance knew that the hard work of building a lasting peace still lay ahead. The scars of the war ran deep, and the task of healing the wounds and rebuilding the shattered worlds would take generations. And so, as the galaxy began to pick up the pieces and chart a new course for the future, Lina Soren and her allies set to work on the monumental task of forging a new and better galaxy from the ashes of the old. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, and that there would be many challenges and setbacks along the way. But they also knew that they had something that the Zeraxians and their ilk could never understand or defeat: the power of unity, the strength that comes from standing together in the face of adversity. And with that knowledge, they faced the future with hope and determination, ready to build a galaxy that was truly worth fighting for. Chapter 6: A New Era. Years had passed since the fall of the Zeraxian Empire, and the galaxy had undergone a profound transformation. The Alliance, under the wise and steady leadership of Lina Soren, had worked tirelessly to rebuild and reunite the shattered worlds left in the wake of the war. It had been a long and difficult process, fraught with challenges and setbacks, but slowly and surely, a new era of peace and prosperity had taken hold. Across the galaxy, the scars of the war were beginning to fade. The once ruined cities and planets had been rebuilt and revitalized, their populations thriving and growing in the newfound stability and security of the Alliance. New trade routes and diplomatic ties had been established, bringing the disparate worlds and cultures of the galaxy closer together than ever before. At the heart of this transformation stood the capital world of the Alliance, a shining beacon of unity and progress. Here, in the grand halls and chambers of the Alliance Council, representatives from every corner of the galaxy gathered to debate and shape the future of their shared civilization. Under Lina Soren's guidance, they worked to build a new galactic order founded on the principles of cooperation, equality, and mutual respect. It was a vision that Lina had fought for all her life, a dream that had sustained her through the darkest days of the war and beyond. And now, as she stood before the assembled leaders of the galaxy, she could hardly believe that it had finally become a reality. But even as she celebrated the achievements of the present, Lina knew that the work of building a better future was far from over. The galaxy was still a vast and complex place, filled with countless challenges and opportunities, and there would always be those who sought to upset the delicate balance of peace and stability. And so, as she looked out across the sea of faces before her, Lina issued a challenge to the assembled leaders and citizens of the galaxy. She called on them to remain vigilant and committed to the ideals that had brought them this far, to stand together in the face of whatever challenges lay ahead. She urged them to remember the sacrifices of those who had given their lives to make this new era possible, and to honor their memory by building a galaxy that was truly worth fighting for. As she spoke, Lina could feel the weight of history on her shoulders, the responsibility of guiding the galaxy towards a brighter and more hopeful future. But she also felt a sense of pride and purpose, a deep conviction that the Alliance and its people were up to the task. And so, with a final rallying cry, Lina Soren brought the assembly to a close, sending the leaders of the galaxy back to their worlds and their people with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, and that there would be many more challenges and obstacles to overcome. But she also knew that the Alliance had something that no enemy or adversary could ever take away: the power of unity, the strength that comes from standing together in the face of adversity. And with that knowledge, she faced the future with hope and courage, ready to lead the galaxy into a new era of peace, prosperity, and progress. As the leaders of the galaxy dispersed and returned to their homes, they carried with them the spirit of the Alliance, the unbreakable bonds of friendship and common purpose that had been forged in the crucible of war. And across the galaxy, from the bustling cities to the farthest outposts, the people of the Alliance looked to the future with renewed hope and determination, ready to build a galaxy that was truly united, truly free, and truly worth fighting for. The Xeraxian War had been a defining moment in the history of the galaxy, a time of great suffering and sacrifice, but also of great courage and resolve. And now, as the galaxy entered a new era of peace and prosperity, the legacy of that struggle would live on, a testament to the enduring power of unity and the indomitable spirit of all those who had fought and died to make it possible. And at the center of it all stood Lena Soren, the woman who had led the galaxy through its darkest hour and into the light of a new day. She had been a leader, a warrior, and a visionary, and her name would be remembered and honored for generations to come. For she had shown the galaxy the true meaning of unity and had given them all a reason to hope, to dream, and to fight for a better tomorrow.